Welcome to the Life Poetic with Thomas Keily, your weekly knowledge drop of wordcraft and invocation. This week we're looking at the Japanese Zen poet Ryokan. Someday I'll be a weather-beaten skull resting on a grass pillow, serenaded by a stray bird or two. Kings and commoners end up the same, no more enduring than last night's dream. I descended to the valley to gather orchids, but the basin was blanketed with frost and dew, and it took all day to find the flowers. Suddenly I thought of an old friend. Separated from me by miles of mountains and rivers, will we ever meet again? I gazed toward the sky, tears streaming down my cheeks. We meet only to part, coming and going like white clouds, leaving traces so faint, hardly a soul notices. Ryokan is a very popular Japanese poet and sort of an archetypal mystic. He spent many years studying in monasteries with great Zen masters, but then spent the rest of his life living in a hermitage somewhere out in the mountains, subsisting on very little, begging for food, and then writing this amazing poetry and calligraphy and offering these little gifts to the world. Ryokan himself was very playful and very lively and also very humble. There's a story I really like how a great lord of the region came and asked Ryokan to be the head abbot at a temple he was building. And Ryokan thought about it for a little bit and then took out a pen and paper and wrote a little poem which said, the wind brings me enough fallen leaves to light a fire. And with that the Lord nodded his head and left. It's one of the hallmarks of Asian poetry, Chinese and Japanese poetry in particular, is this the references to the natural world, and in particular anchoring sort of certain emotional states within the natural world. And so you can see in this poem, Ryokan's talking about the love that he has for his friend and the sorrow he feels for not being able to spend time with him anymore. But he preludes that by this sort of a strong description of the natural world, or this hunt for orchids within this sort of harsh environment is filled with snow and frost and dew. And so it helps, he's using the natural imagery there as a way to help you understand the feeling that he has for his lost friend. It's like one of these beautiful, sweet moments of life that are really hard to find within the great thrust and hurly-burly of life, and are all the more precious for that. And then when you lose them, there is this great, I've lost it. And so he's sort of anchoring this sort of longing and sorrow he has for his friend in this flower hunt image. And the reason I really like this technique, and it's one of the rules of haiku in particular, that there's some reference to the natural seasons, is it helps, I think, expand the emotional world outside from the poet's heart and into the surrounding natural universe. And that everything that's being experienced within the poet's heart and reader's heart is there reflected in the natural universe. And with that idea comes this great unity, this great idea that there's no separation between the human and the entire world. The other thing I really like about this piece is that we have this idea in the West in particular of someone who is enlightened, someone who, a Zen master, as being someone with no discernible emotions. He's just sort of chilling just above everything, floating on top, and everything shanti shanti and happy. And I think Ryokan really speaks against that archetype. And he's saying here, he looks to the sky and there are tears streaming down his face. So even though he was an enlightened being by all accounts, he still has this intense emotional richness to his experience of the world. In another poem he writes, he says, if you want to know the secret of Zen Buddhism, here it is. Everything is in the heart. So let's take another quick look. Someday I'll be a weather-beaten skull resting on a grass pillow, serenaded by a stray bird or two. Kings and commoners end up the same, no more enduring than last night's dream. I descended to the valley to gather orchids, but the basin was blanketed with frost and dew, and it took all day to find the flowers. Suddenly I thought of an old friend, separated from me by miles of mountains and rivers. Will we ever meet again? I gazed toward the sky, tears streaming down my cheeks. We meet only to part, coming and going like white clouds, leaving traces so faint, hardly a soul notices. This has been the Life Poetic with Thomas Keily. We look forward to seeing you next week.